It wouldn't be a real conversation about in 2020 if we didn't discuss virtual events. Hearing the data from Explory this morning, thank you, Sophie, again for that session, explained how our audiences are keen to get back to live events, but how virtual and hybrid are here to stay. To speak to this discussion and more, we've got Rich Belcher, Managing Director of First Sight Media, a video and production streaming specialist company, and also the platform that you're watching our sessions on from live. And so, Rich, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I am definitely going to shift the conversation from the sales and marketing chat, although I could have listened to that conversation for a while, but I'm definitely going to shift the conversation to a bit more technical, and I apologize in advance. I will do my best not to be desperately technical, but as the owner of a video production and streaming company, I assume you expect me to be. So therefore, I will do the honors and do so. So I have a brief presentation, and you probably, for anyone that knows me, you will know that I'm used to being very much the opposite side of the camera. So forgive my babble, but quick introduction to who First Sight Media are. So as Katie mentioned, we are doing the streaming for this afternoon, and all day. And we're a video streaming specialist that specializes in events. So as you can imagine, like lots of you, 2020 has been a rather tough year. Our order book disappeared in the blink of an eye in March. And since April, we've been producing virtual events of all shapes and sizes, from a charity Zoom chat with Emil Heskey to extravagant virtual awards with Stephen Morhen. And we've pretty much seen it all. So we've we've changed from going on site and traveling to events coming to us. And then that's remotely now to one of our 5 studios here in Oxfordshire. We've adapted our headquarters. We've doubled our square footage in September. We now have 5 studios, as I mentioned, and a lot more equipment, mainly to cater for this virtual and hybrid environment that we so lovingly find ourselves in. As you can see from this next slide, the data has just gone through the roof. So this is the usage stats of our servers, and coupled with the fact that a lot of it is streamed through Facebook and YouTube and all that, you can see there's been a massive increase from our average streaming to where we are now. And I think that what the massive growth in September indicates is, I think the announcement by the government, which I think was end of August, early September, it could have been yesterday, I'm not really sure at this point, sort of gave everybody the confidence that, okay, virtual is the way to go for now. And so that's what I'm going to do. And you see that in the spike in traffic that we had in September. So as a video production and streaming company, it's probably fair to say, and I'm going to use 2 of the dreaded words that were mentioned earlier quite a lot in this presentation. And I'm going to start by saying that our pivot was kind of more of a shuffle. And in the next 15 to 20 minutes, or 17 minutes and 20 seconds to be precise, I'm going to try to convince you that you guys can shuffle as well, rather than pivot, by simply adapting your offline format to incorporate the best parts of a virtual format and create a hybrid event. Now, I can't really ask for a show of hands, which is what I would normally like to do, but I'm going to work on the assumption that many of you are sort of joint organisers of events and the marketers thereof, but that you predominantly have been organising and marketing offline events, i.e. in-person events. You may well have streamed a bit of content here and there. Maybe you streamed your main session or part of your exhibition, but actually you've viewed streaming to this point as the enemy of offline events. My presentation isn't about convincing you that's wrong, but maybe you'll see in the next few slides that there are benefits to this virtual and hybrid environment that we find ourselves in. So a quick definition. So I'll be very surprised to anybody that doesn't know what a virtual event is now. We may not have known in 2019, but we certainly do now. So a virtual event is where everybody creates and experiences the event online. So it's completely virtual. There's no physical presence by anyone. And a hybrid event is where some parts are in person and some parts are online. Now, a hybrid event is not new. Right. Obviously, today is a really good example of a hybrid event. I'm here in Oxford and the other guys are in the studio. But hybrid event is not new. A hybrid event is what it was when you streamed your plenary session. A hybrid event is what it was when you had a cameraman that came and created a highlights video that you then put up on Facebook to get some advertising or to encourage people to tomorrow or the next day or whatever. The big difference from a hybrid event that you know and what a hybrid event is going to be is that in the past, a hybrid event has been bolting on a virtual element to your offline event. For the coming months, however long that may be, 6 months, a year, let's hope it's less, but whatever it ends up being, the hybrid event that we define here is going to be you putting an in-person element into your virtual element, because the shift has changed massively. So I've got another cliche here, which is the new normal, but I've changed it to the current normal because everything's changing so quickly that essentially this presentation will probably be desperately out of date in a few days' time. Let's hope a few weeks, but I'll try and keep it relevant as much as possible. So virtual has definitely been the event of choice for much of 2020, but as restrictions are changing, we can start to shift our priorities and move into a different environment. What you've got to consider, though, is the challenges of these new events and how you market these challenges and how you market your event in this new environment. So, of course, capacities is going to be something you've got to think about. Social distancing quickly destroys a 250 person venue and makes it 30, 40 maybe. Travel, well, is there the ability? There's obviously some places going to have an inability to travel, but also is there going to be a willingness to travel in the new environment? Who knows? Regional restrictions can play a key part in how you do things. And with the economy in crisis, of course, budget is going to be a big detail as well. And mitigating risk is something I've added here as well, because the current normal might not be the normal on the day of your event. And you've really got to think on your toes about how you do these things. So is hybrid the answer to all your questions? Well, the most realistic event in the current normal allows speakers to be hosted centrally with audiences watching from home, much like this event today. And as someone that's producing virtual events daily, control is the key. And what we're missing in virtual, what all us producers and technical teams miss, is to be able to control stuff. And as event organizers and marketers, control is what you need to bring in to be able to deliver a successful event. So I spend much of my time fighting with speakers, webcams, microphones, broadbands, firewalls, and basically their technology. It's an utter nightmare, I assure you. But what a hybrid event does is by bringing some elements in person, so like today where we've got the speakers all together, or some of the speakers all together, you develop some of that control and you bring it back. So if we move on to the next slide, okay, so it's not the answer to all your questions, but it's probably a good answer to some. So if we take the challenges that I just listed in the previous slide and we go back to them, so capacities, if it's just speakers on site, you can use green rooms to ensure social distancing and clever. I'm not entirely sure how it's happening in the studio today, but if it's a small invited audience with the rest online, you can achieve the same thing and bring the number of people together down, but still have the same audience reach. Travel, if your audience can't travel, they can still watch online. If your keynote can't, if you've got some keynote that you want, some keynote speaker from the US or from a different time zone, they can just dial in whenever they want. The regional restrictions, anything can be delivered offline that anything can be delivered offline that can be delivered offline. They don't always work 100% as well, but pretty much anything can be done. And we'll talk about that again in a minute. With budgets, you can cherry pick what's important to you, and you can drastically decrease the cost of putting on your event and marketing your event to the audience by going hybrid. There's no hefty catering bills, there's no plane tickets, there's no hotels. And by mitigating risk, because by choosing hybrid, you're planning for both. You're planning for both the offline and the online, and it's much quicker to flip from a hybrid event to a virtual event than it is from a physical event, because you don't have the last minute scramble in the dark for a platform and to work out how to bring speakers in, because you've already worked it out with your hybrid. So there's great benefits there. So I'm going to give you a quick case study, and I know that it's not an exhibition. If this was in a month's time, I'd be able to tell you all about how Event Tech Live went, which we're working with the Event Industry News team on. But for this case study, I've got a session from Oxford, the Oxford Library 700 conference, which was hosted by the Bodleian, I always get it wrong, Bodleian Library team. And it was originally planned as a live event, but it pivoted to hybrid quite early. I think it was about 3 weeks ago, and I think the initial conversation with them came in May. I think they knew it was going to be the case, and actually it was only a few more COVID cases in Oxford away from becoming a completely virtual event, but that's another story altogether. So a few details about what that event was. I think one of the most important things here is the custom built website that we provided for them. And it's hugely important for the overall customer journey. And as marketeers, customer journey is something in the virtual world that you guys, I'm sure, are very familiar with talking about, and making sure that they understand the customer journey and how they get there. So if you've got something either off the shelf or something that you've created yourself, it means that you can steer them in the right directions. And of course, registration was captured, and so there was 21 speakers in total, 12 of which were virtual and 9 in person. And of course, we put everything online straight after, so that they could speak. Again, we had an about section, the schedule, the speakers, a video gallery, and all the on-demand content went on there. And I know that what you really care about is not the technicalities of what happened. You care about the outcomes, and that's fine. I've got a slide about that too. Don't worry. So there were so typically this would have been about a 400-person offline event was what was originally scheduled to be. As you can see, the live registrations far exceeded that. And I know when I was talking to Katie originally about this talk, she was asking me about take up, and I've made a note there to suggest that there was about 50% of the people that registered that actually attended. It's much more that attended online, on demand rather, but for the live environment, 2,400 registered, just over 1,000. Okay, so not quite 50%. Inaccurate piece of data there for you. But it was from 85 different countries, and they never would have got that in a million years if it was in Oxford alone. The on-demand content had massive views as well. But engagement is key, and again, something that I'm sure you guys are all keen to hear about. And there was a massive increase in this level of social engagement than they would have expected. They really targeted particular channels, which is a piece of advice that I'm sure you all know. Twitter was their particular weapon of choice, and they were able to build momentum in advance over social, answer questions, made sure they got back to all the tweets, and they gave clarity to everybody who was looking to understand what was going to happen and how it's going to work, so they could get their audience and their speakers as prepared as possible in advance of the session. And some lovely comments and thoughts came from it, which of course they were delighted with. So what you really want to know, I'm sure, is how to increase conversion. And with hybrid, there are no geographical boundaries, but by far the greatest challenge that you guys are going to face is the competition for audiences and how to make your event stand out. Whatever your event is, it needs to set you apart, and should actually the definition of your event should help you define the running of it from the outset. promotion is key. This is going to mean pushing out more reminders. So you need to make sure you decide early on the key timings and have clear messaging, as it's still quite new for many people. And so you need to offer a clear customer journey, which I mentioned before. So I'm going to give Matt's podcast a little shout here. So I was listening to that this earlier in the week, and everybody's friend Adam Parry from Event Industry News said something really poignant that I think is really appropriate at this point, actually. And what he said was, I don't think any virtual event should really have the aim of their entire audience being engaged all the time. I think it's a reach too far. And he went on to explain how social media channels are always on and always open, but what their job is, and what the job of the event organizer and the event marketeers should be, is to keep people coming back, and to keep giving them teasers and keep giving them tasters. So I'm gonna leave that in your mind for a moment while I move on to the next point. So how to increase conversion. So there's a few things, and I have got some top tips for you that I've gathered from some of my colleagues, but the promise of live is something that people often take for granted. And I think if you have the content on demand these days, everybody is so used to Netflix and iPlayer and basically watching stuff whenever they want, that there needs to be a real hook for something to live. Why should I tune in live? What's in it for me? How are you going to help me engage? But also brevity is really important. And we are generally recommending to our customers to try and keep everything short, and don't just cut and paste your offline agenda into an online environment, whether it be hybrid or virtual. Everything needs to be pithy. Think 15 to 20 minutes, much like today's presentations, 15 to 20-minute presentations, followed by some key interactive elements, some panel discussions. Excellent example. Interactivity. We all know about Q&A and polling, but what does your event do that thinks outside the box? A little aside here is that we were working on an event with our friends at Production Bureau last week, and for a pharmaceutical, they had an evening do with a DJ. And the DJ came in via Zoom, and we pushed him out through the stream. And when I was connecting with the DJ and just talking to him and making sure he was happy and comfortable, I thought, this is the worst idea I've ever seen in my life. This is going to be car crash. But of the some 220 people that were registered to attend, 200 joined. And his Twitter blew up. He was getting requests. He could have played for 20 hours and still not got through all the requests. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, first of all, that I was wrong, and anyone that works at First Sight Media won't be used to me saying that. But in this case, I was wrong, and it actually was a brilliant idea. And what I want you to take from that is, I want you to start thinking outside the box. What is the most important part of your event? What is the marketable part of your event? And it might well be the DJ. Pre-recording is something that you can use to protect your event, and go back to the point I made about control earlier. But also make sure you've got a hook. Make sure that there is something that is going to drag in. I mentioned about the promise of live, and this kind of goes into that. Make sure that you, whether it's physical, virtual, or hybrid, make sure that you've got a good excuse for people to tune in. And then a plan. Don't expect a virtual or a hybrid event just to fall out of thin air, because this is the thing that's happening all the time at the moment. It takes time. It takes a lot of time. It takes probably more time than a physical event, because you're used to doing a physical event, and you know that supplier will do this and this will do that, and you can pull from this and pull from that. So please plan is the key. So what's the next normal look like? Well, I don't know is the short answer, but I think hybrid events are certainly something that will happen. And live streaming was previously a nice to have and a kind of bolt on that you thought about, oh, we've got an extra couple of £100, let's see if we can get it live streamed. I think now live streaming is being used as a channel. It would take Event Take Live as an example. They're using it as a way to try and grow their event internationally, and it's really awesome for that. So I did say that I had some top tips, and here they are. And I unfortunately don't have time to go through all of them. But I think a couple of the ones I really want to pick out is don't overcomplicate things. So when you're planning your virtual or hybrid event, if Zoom will do, be happy with Zoom. If Microsoft Teams will do, which is what I'm connecting on here, use Microsoft Teams. Of course, I want you to use First Sight Media and engage with a production company so it will be perfect. But sometimes it doesn't need that. But also, just to reiterate what I said earlier about cutting and pasting your agenda, don't just do that. Make sure that there's a level of interactivity and work across lots of different mediums and through lots of and throw lots of ideas out there. So with 30 seconds to go, I just want to, I think the one thing I want to leave you with, and the one piece of advice I can give you is the more you can learn now about delivering virtual and or hybrid events whilst you have to, because that's all you can really do at the moment, the better equipped you're going to be in 2021 and 2022 and beyond, where an element of hybrid event is here to stay. Because I think we can all agree that users are now used to dealing with virtual in a very different way. And hopefully, as someone that owns a video production company and streaming company, that will be here to stay. So thank you very much. Katie, have we had any engagement on any of that whatsoever?
No, we haven't had many questions today. If anybody would like to ask any questions, please just drop them in the Slido. I think there's a slight lag. Sometimes I get them a little bit later, but I've got some questions on the virtual experience.
I can tell you there's a 35-second delay on the stream, so that will be part of it. So hopefully they're just waiting for me to finish in 20 seconds or so, and then there'll be millions of questions.
They're still thinking.
Yeah, right. But you go ahead.
Yes, I would have to agree with you that for one of the points you raised is that filming and production and having those videos and having guys like you on site has always been a lovely part of my budget that starts off at the beginning of the marketing campaign. And when we're trying to desperately save cash at the end, it's like, oh, for goodness sake, and it always gets cut. However, that's just not going to be possible in future, especially hearing from Sophie and exploring what people are going to be expecting. When it comes to costs and budgeting, is there something we need to look for when we're recruiting the right style of supplier? I know I'm combining this with the fact that Laura from Tag Digital said that Facebook marketing will be predominantly, or Facebook generally will be predominantly videos by 2022. So video production is not just going to be a nice to have, it's going to be so much more. Is there particular skills when picking our own suppliers? Who should we be looking for if we're trying to do a hybrid event?
Yeah, great question.
It's a very long-winded question. Sorry.
Look no further. Look no further than First Sight Media, needless to say. But go back to my point about if Zoom will do, be happy with Zoom. It really depends on the complexity of your event, and if you're looking to recreate something that you have no experience of creating, then you definitely need to engage with a partner. Absolutely. If you're wanting to dip your toe in the water, and we all learnt this over the last 9 months, I have some customers that had no idea at the beginning, but then we have some customers coming online now that have a bit of an idea, so are able to divide. And I think the last piece of information that I gave you on that last slide about learn what you can by attending events, learning what works for you, learning what you enjoy engaging with. Chances are a lot of your the events that you're looking to the attendees that you're looking to capture will enjoy those too. But in terms of finding the right supplier, it's a tough one because there are a lot of them, and there are a lot of them out there that have magicked as if from nowhere in the last few months. So I would say look at experience, get some good case studies and get some good examples, get some good references. There you go. I don't know if that helps.
Yes, it does. Yeah, it does. And I'm just going to check here. We have had a question. What would be your advice for somebody who's a bit of a technophobe and would like to learn more? This is from Alana.
Yeah, well, I guess I think both of the things I've just said. One is to give a good video production and streaming company a call if you're really unsure. But actually, the other thing that, and probably the more cost-effective thing for you, might be just to watch some stuff and attend some things. Like things like today are really going to help the industry in guiding people through the right things, learning from the experience that we all as experts have put together. And things like, I mentioned Event Tech Live coming up the first week of November. That's another good one. There's some really fantastic talks coming up on that. So I think attend some events, whether they be events which are learning events like this one, or events that are just things that you like the sound of and you just want to test the water. I think that's a really good way to learn, actually, is just by delving into some stuff.
I've got another couple of questions. Anna asks, what are the main advantages of live streaming versus on demand?
Well, I think engagement is the answer, and I mentioned about having a good reason to be live, and actually I mentioned how important control is as well, and control with pre-recorded stuff is, as you can imagine, far greater. But engagement is always much more difficult with that, and it's always much easier to drive to drive an audience to a particular time, and with a particular reason to tune in. At 2:45 today, you got to see me. That's why everyone's turned up. That's the sort of thing that you need to be thinking about. But if there's no reason, if you're not looking for engagement with Slido or whatever, then you probably save yourself a few quid by not doing it live. And some stress as well. My hairline would be much higher if we did it.
I love that. I've got a question, and maybe this is a bit unfair for you, but is there a defined definition of virtual, hybrid, digital, online? We use these words interchangeably, and yet the experience as user, we never know what the full experience is going to be. From the beginning, I explained what I meant from our event being live and hybrid, but is there definitions, industry definitions? Are the technical industry looking at the events industry going, what the hell are you talking about? Or,
Yeah, I mean, I think digital is an interchangeable
nodding, by the way.
Yeah, for sure, he's right. Yeah, I mean, for virtual is, I think, how I defined it earlier in my presentation was that virtual is where everybody experiences and creates the event online, and then hybrid has an element of all of that, but also some in-person stuff. And I guess in-person is, I guess offline would be what you would call that. But I mean, the word digital is very flaky, and you'll never catch me or the cameraman using that phrase, I'm sure. But I think, I think is the answer. And I think different people use it differently, and different companies use it differently. But I think certainly the last 9 months has taught us a few things about what virtual means, and certainly what hybrid means is something I'm sure will come out in the next 9 months.
We've had a comment from a chap called Stuart Tipler who said, I helped deliver an event that would attract 1,300 people in person and had over 3,000 register for the virtual, which is fantastic. That's over double the audience. The key success was live chat and engagement. Obviously, we've got engagement. We can have engagement here in the studio, but actually we haven't opened that engagement between our network and the people watching. That's definitely a learn for us for next year. It goes back to that control, what you were talking about, controlling the environment, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, that's great, Stuart. Well done. And I think, that again goes back to my point about having a reason to be live. And if the reason to be live is so you can engage with your exhibitors, or you can engage with your attendees, your delegates, then that's a good example of why they're able to, and I think, and I've been banging this drum for a while. This isn't a new drum that I've been hitting. Live streaming does open up a wealth of possibilities, and it's unfortunate that it's taken what's happened in the last few months to hopefully open a few more eyes to it. I was producing a very interesting presentation about the Nightingale Hospital from the University of West of England, Bristol, last night, and apparently one of the speakers mentioned that telephones weren't really a big thing until the Spanish flu. And one of the big marketing pushes for the telephone was quarantine isn't alone if you've got a telephone. It's really interesting how these sorts of things, because I think we've had a pandemic like this every 100 years for the last few hundred years or something, it's interesting how it brings out technology, and I think streaming and hybrid events and virtual events is certainly the main beneficiaries of that adaptation.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time. There aren't any other questions, and we're just at time now. So thank you so much, Rich, and thank you to your team as well for supplying the platform today.
No worries. Well done, Matt.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura, one of the founders at Tag Digital. Tag Digital is a PPC agency for event organisers. Our remit is to deliver visitor registrations, exhibitor leads, delegates, awards and new data for event organisers. We work in campaigns all over the world for organisers like Informa, Mesa Frankfurt, Dubai World Trade Centre, Essential, ITE and lots more.